Tonight, we're going to explore the intersection of humor and politics. In part, it's a Jewish story, but it's also a bigger story. With the seemingly endless campaign behind us, it's a perfect time to step back and reflect on the influence satire has had on this election and on American politics in general. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to talk about Moment. People sometimes ask me why they should care about Moment. There's so many publications out there in the world, print and online. What makes Moment unique? Well, our mission. In the Jewish world, Moment remains the rare independent publication that blends culture, philosophy, and literature with intellectual analysis. It never preaches. Rather, we leave you with answers and questions to ponder. Quality. We just don't traffic in opinion. We aim for the very best in journalism. We recently won first place from the Religion News Writers Association for overall excellence in a magazine, as well as many other awards for design and editorial. Lineage. It's part of Jewish heritage. Not only was the magazine founded by Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel and Leonard Fine, it's the namesake of a Yiddish language newspaper called Der Moment, which was founded in 1910 in Warsaw and shut down when the Nazis invaded in 1939. Sadly, many magazines have closed their doors. We're fortunate that Moment has survived because we live in this wonderful world where it's really cool to be Jewish right now. And as Elie Wiesel has said, that makes Moment important not just to Jews, but to everyone. And today's Moment is so many people, board, staff, volunteers. I want to introduce you to one of them, one very special person, Sarah Brieger, who started as a fellow and has now become our managing editor. I want to welcome Sarah.
Since 2008, the Harold S. White Fellowship has allowed one young journalist to join Moment staff for a year. I was a fellow in 2009, but I just forgot to leave. The fellowship, named in honor of Rabbi White, who is an honored board member of our honored member of our board, is just one of Moment's many outstanding projects. To find out more about our fellowships and our international short fiction, Elephant in the Room, and Publish a Kid contests, Emerging Writer Awards, and their deadlines, as well as our events at the Museum, DCJCC, Chautauqua, and other venues, I invite you to visit momentmag.com or visit the Moment information table in the lobby. Now I'd like to introduce Mary Hadar, who runs our Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative when she's not working as an editor at the Washington Post.
Okay, Moment launched the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative in 2010 with the support of the Pearl family, Judea and Ruth Pearl. It was started to honor the memory of the 38-year-old Wall Street Journal reporter who was slain by terrorists a decade ago. The initiative makes it possible for young journalists to research and write in-depth stories about modern manifestations of deeply ingrained prejudices, which it turns out is a very difficult task, especially for young journalists. The reporters need mentoring to navigate the complex subjects and face a deluge of hate, which they get while they're reporting, which is what happened to our very first winner. In addition to financial support, a panel of veteran journalists assists the grantees. On completion, the stories are published in Moment. The first one was published in 2012, I think in May. It's available at the information table in the lobby. And our next story by Eve Fairbanks is on the resurgence of racism in South Africa and will be published in early 2013. I want to thank all of you for being here and supporting this initiative, which we all really believe in. And your presence here and your silent auction and live auction bids, all of this helps us to go on. So thank you very much. And here's Nadine.
Thank you, Mary, for all your work on behalf of the project. There's a full list of the people who are on the advisory panel of the DPIJI in your program, and not all of them could join us tonight, but a few that are here are Rick Dunham, Linda Feldman, Bob Greenberger, Amy Caslow, Charles Lewis, Lisa Newman, Amy Schwartz, Robert Siegel, and Lynn Sweet. So thank you very much for being on that. Now I'd like to ask Moment board member Burt Foer and his family to come up and join us here on the stage. Burt, if you could sit here in the seat of honor. And Tamara Handelsman, who is another wonderful board member. Where's Esther? Yeah. Is Esther coming up too? Where? There she is. Okay. Tamara? No, Tamara, you come up here. Okay.
I'll try.
So you can start reading right here.
I have it right here. Hi. Tonight we're honoring Burt Foer, a longtime board member. We're honoring him in behalf of his work for Moment magazine. Burt helped Nadine when she took over Moment in 2004, and ever since has been by her side with wise advice and very good ideas. He has been invaluable in shaping the future of Moment. Burt Foer is president and founder of the American Antitrust Institute. He has served as the president of the ACLU of the National Capital Area and is co-founder of the Washington Associates of Ben-Gurion University. He is the husband of Esther Saffron Foer, another Moment magazine board member. And she has been, in her own right, the energizing force behind Sixth and I. Burt is the father of Franklin Foer, Jonathan Saffron Foer, and Joshua Foer. The Foers are members of this very congregation, Adas Israel, as are my husband and I, which is very nice. I am delighted that Burt and Esther's three sons are with us this evening to present a short tribute to their dad.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm the middle four. So my brothers and I had prepared some pretty extensive remarks for tonight, I think structured in a pretty interesting, lively way, and they were really, really, really touching, quite emotional, and also very funny. And I think that they scratched at what is exceptional about my father and why he is a human being very much worth celebrating. We are not going to give those remarks tonight. We were rehearsing in our house about an hour and a half ago, this document actually, which is face down on the podium. And as we reached the end of it, and it was this emotional climax, Frank turned and said, "Guys, how are we going to make sure we don't laugh when we're doing this?" And he asked it for a very good reason, because we have a history of laughing together. The last time that the three of us ever shared a stage, believe it or not, was 17 years ago. And believe it or not, it was this stage. It was Josh's bar mitzvah. And Josh chanted Torah beautifully, or as far as we could tell. Being conservative Jews, we had no idea what he was saying or if it was right or wrong. And Frank and I came up to chant Ashrei with him. Now, for anybody who's ever chanted Ashrei, you know that there's nothing funny about Ashrei. It's a Jewish recitation. I still don't even know what it means. But the three of us together found it very funny. And we started gently chuckling, and then it took on its own momentum, and we started laughing. And for any of you who have ever laughed on the bima, you know that it's very hard to stop once you start. And Cantor Singer, who I'm virtually positive is not in the audience tonight, said to us, "Zip it up, boys." A flagrant sexual double entendre, which sent us into the stratosphere. Now, to his infinite credit, Josh was able to finish the ashrei. But then there was the matter of stepping down from the bima. As you see, there are 3 very long steps to get up here. And this was an important occasion, not only because it was a momentous rite of passage for Josh, but we had relatives from like 25 countries who had come to be there. The intimidating Israeli cousins were there. My parents' friends were there. Business associates were there. And as we were walking down the steps, I thought, I really wonder how my dad is going to react to what just happened. There were a lot of ways he could have chosen to react. He could have said his own version of "Zip it up, boys." He could have given us stern looks. He could have given us a silent treatment. He could have given us a lecture. But instead, he gave a kind of wry smile, and he patted me on the back. And I've thought about that a lot, and my brothers and I have thought about that a lot. And we've convinced ourselves that that smile and that pat contained an awful lot of meaning, which my younger brother Josh will now unpack.
I was wondering why I was so nervous about this tonight, but this is truly revisiting the scene of the crime. I think that actually that moment that at the bottom of the bima says a lot about my father, not just the kind of father he is, always supportive but never pushing, but also about his relationship to religion. And he's here tonight being honored for his years of service, of uncompensated service, to Moment magazine. And he's certainly involved in lots of Jewish institutions, but he is only by the most generous stretch of the definition a religious person. But there are many ways to express what religion expresses, and I think for my father the essential spiritual act has always been laughter. And all of the salient memories of my childhood, most of the salient memories of my childhood, are of laughing with my father and my brothers, usually at my father. Sometimes my mother would join in. And there are really 2 kinds of humor that could have been present in that moment at the bottom of the bima. There's a kind of humor that pushes down, that distances, and there's a kind of humor that elevates, that draws near, that is capable of making the profane holy. And that's really the kind of humor that you've taught us, or tried to teach us, and it's, I think, the greatest gift you've given us. It's a way of moving through the world and laughing at its profound strangeness, and doing it, laughing as a kind of act of humility, and as a way of expressing one's sense of wonder at the world. So thank you for that.
Yidaber P. I mean, it's a laugh line. I was with my father and my 2 daughters, who are 7 and 5, the other day, and we were with a woman who was profoundly unself-aware of her audience, and she began telling us a story, a really good story, and she got into it. And she just started dropping F-bombs. I mean, it was like she was like an insurgent with an IAD. They were just like all over the place. And my response as a father was to cup my hands over their ears to shut out this stream of profanity. And as I went to kind of metaphorically do this and try to shut down or to tone down the profanity, my father gave me an extremely nasty look. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, I didn't raise my son to curse like Richard Nixon, and I didn't raise my grandchildren to curse like Richard Nixon. And I'd rather them curse well and know how to curse so that they can curse well, rather than. And to me, this was a very beautiful sentiment. I mean, his attitude is. I won't drop an F-bomb, but that we live in a vulgar world, and we live in an imperfect world, and there's one response to it, which would be to cup the ears and shut out those sentiments, and then there's another attitude, which is to appreciate the world as it exists, to enjoy the most vulgar parts, to see the better side of those parts, to approach the world with a sense of optimism, curiosity, and engagement. And I guess you probably do need a sense of humor if you're going to engage with the commitment, the depth of commitment that you've engaged with Judaism and Jewish institutions, despite your profound annoyance with Judaism and Jewish institutions. He is the most anti-clerical member of the synagogue to ever chair the personnel committee. But the three of us, Josh just became a father. And so all three of us, yes, laugh. No, mazel tov. The three of us now have the opportunity to consider just how hard it is to do what you do, and just how lucky we were to have been enveloped in your sense of curiosity, your integrity, your laughter, and your love. So thank you.
Thank you. They're always a hard act to follow, you know. When Nadine asked me if I would take one for the team by subjecting myself to these kinds of indignities, I said, sure. Everybody wants their 15 minutes of celebrity. And Nadine said, well, I was thinking about 45 seconds. So that does not give me time to comment on anything that you just heard. I would love to, but it would take much too long. I can say a special thank you very quickly to my family and to Esther, to all the relatives and friends, many friends who are here. It's just wonderful to see you and that you would turn out for Moment Magazine. I want to thank, of course, Nadine, who has been a good friend and a spectacular editor and publisher of what I think is a truly important magazine. It's been a great privilege to work with her and her team, who work under very strenuous circumstances. They work hard, and they don't have a real easy life in what they do. They do it because they love it, and they're getting a lot of pleasure out of the product, as I hope many of you do. I want to go back just for a second into the history of my involvement. Herschel Shanks was the owner at the time when I first got involved, and Herschel asked me to create an advisory board that could work with him. He had 5 publications, one of which was Moment. The others mostly dealt with archaeology and biblical archaeology, Bible review, and later, over the unanimous advice of his advisory board, opened one called Archaeological Odyssey. The group that was giving him this advice included the late Warren Dennis, who was our chair, and Harry Linnos, who is here, and Randy Levitt. Is Randy here? And for about 10 or 11 years, we met and gave advice. And sometimes it was followed, often it wasn't. And then the magazine was sold to Nadine. and I was privileged to begin working with her and to watch the tremendous improvement. It was a good magazine before, but with Nadine's work and imagination and the staff she put together, it became better, and it gets better every issue. There's a great group of people working on the advisory, the much larger advisory board. I guess we call it the board of directors now, but we're not really directors. It's Nadine's show. And so I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and urge you to support this very valuable magazine. It really fills a niche that nobody else fills, and we need it more than ever. So thank you all, and thank you guys. You weren't too bad.
Burt, before you go, we have something for you.
Oh.
It's Burt on the cover of Moment. Now I'd like to invite the winners of the 2012 Moment Magazine Creativity Awards up to the stage. The Moment Magazine Creativity Awards were established in 2011 to recognize individuals for exceptional creativity in their professions. Moment Magazine opinion editor Amy Schwartz is going to help introduce the honorees who will be receiving these beautiful awards that were designed by our wonderful designer who's won 1 million awards for us, Naveed Marvi, who's our photographer this evening. So you go first.
Starting from the almost far left, David Brooks is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times and author of many books, most recently The Social Animal, The Hidden Sources of Love, Character, and Achievement in 2011. Most people would call David a conservative public intellectual, but his prolific writings don't always sit well with conservatives or with liberals either, and we have a sneaking suspicion that David likes it that way. Otherwise, why would he send his kids to GDS? In any case, both liberal and conservative audiences know David's work to be forthright, honest, well-reasoned, thoughtful, and concise, and, of course, very creative.
Bob Mankoff, over there on the far left. He's the cartoon editor of The New Yorker, founder of the Cartoon Bank, and the author of The Naked Cartoonist, a new way to enhance your creativity. His creative juices as a smart, provocative, insightful, and did I mention funny, cartoonist have been spicing Moments pages since 2010. He is the talent behind the Moment Magazine cartoon caption contest that you find in every issue.
Working our way over, Paula Poundstone. Stand-up comedian Paula Poundstone, currently sitting down, is a regular on NPR's news quiz show, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And on A Prairie Home Companion, among other places. Paula's mind does not work like yours or mine. And all of us are extremely lucky that that is the case. Her musings reveal the hidden humor in the things of everyday life. She takes things that are either totally normal or totally boring, from Pop-Tarts to cats, cops, and, of course, politics, and through her own brand of creative magic, makes them strange and very, very funny.
Robert Siegel. So, we all know Robert Siegel as a journalist who is blessed with a sonorous, soothing voice. A voice informed by both impressive intelligence, decades of reporting, and investigative experience throughout the world, and by his role as co-host of All Things Considered. Robert's creative drive enriches all that he does. Full disclosure, Robert is also my third cousin and David Brooks' fourth cousin, as the three of us recently discovered through Moment Magazine's Great DNA Experiment.
And finally, Nina Totenberg is, as everyone in this room surely knows, a stellar legal affairs correspondent for NPR. We're very NPR heavy tonight, which is a good thing. Her Supreme Court reporting has won almost every award in broadcast journalism. She's covered everything from Watergate to Anita Hill and beyond up to the present day. What's so creative about Nina's body of work is the way she assembles a mass of detail into a story that both surprises and informs the listener. She is, in fact, a master storyteller, leading us through what in lesser hands could be dry arguments and decisions, and instead creating in our minds a vibrant picture of what's happening in the world.
And finally, we have Allison Silverman. Now, comedy writers inhabit a world behind the scenes. On television, their names roll by so fast in the credits that you can miss them in a blink. Allison Silverman not only helped launch the Colbert Report, for which she received a Peabody and 2 Emmys, but she's written for The Daily Show and Portlandia, and she's now executive producer of The Office. The following tribute to Allison, sent from her friend Stephen Colbert, says it all, and I quote, "When I heard that Moment Magazine was honoring Allison Silverman, the first thing I thought was, I need a subscription to Moment Magazine. They seem like very smart people. Because I can't think of someone in comedy more deserving of praise than Allison. We at the Colbert Report all miss her spirit, her laugh, and of course, her hair. She is a true leader, a bright mind, a great heart, and a good friend. Congratulations, Allison. With love and admiration, Stephen Colbert." The first thing I said to her when I met her this evening was, "You cut your hair." Well, he does as well. Now I want to turn the evening over to our Moment Magazine Creativity Award winners. I want to take it away, Robert.
Hi. Is it on? Yes, hi. Thank you, Nadine. And I'm...
Robert, how come you're the only one with a microphone?
We'll pass it around. We'll pass it. You're getting a real dose of what life at NPR is really like, and the collegial relations that get our programs on the air every day. I'm delighted to be here with so many people who are associated with NPR. It's always nice to actually see the people in the audience, and I, for one, am always struck when I do that you don't look anything like what I thought you would look like. Thought you'd all be a lot taller and have more hair than you do. So we have been given an assignment to discuss the intersection of humor and politics in, I assume, a serious way. And I want to say that I think it's a measure of our affection for Moment and our respect for the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative that we've accepted this assignment with its high risk of fatally ponderous conversation over the next hour or so. At least we're doing it after everyone's had a couple of drinks, which may not affect the panel much, but I'm hoping it will lower the expectations of the audience. When I received an email from Moment advertising the November issue, the email had a banner across the top describing this symposium on the intersection of humor and politics. And then right below it, it had headlines of the articles in the November issue. And the first one was, "Anthony Weiner makes a comeback on Twitter." It reminded me of the sentiment that Philip Roth expressed many decades ago. It's actually cited in the newest New Yorker in a Talk of the Town piece on the Petraeus affair, which actually is the Petraeus affair, it's fair, in which Roth said many years ago that you couldn't write political satire, fiction in America, because of the unfair competition from American political reality. It was always several steps ahead of you. Despite that fact, lots of people are producing satire and find something very funny about politics. A week doesn't go by when someone doesn't tell me that they find the most reliable information they get, always with a polite remark about NPR, is really from either the Colbert Report or the Daily Show. And although it might be a different crowd, the people who proudly call themselves ditto heads and listen to Rush Limbaugh regard him not just as a courageous truth teller, but also as a hilarious commentator on the passing scene. There's a lot of humor out there, a lot of political humor, and I'd like to hear a little bit from our panelists this evening about these two topics and whether we really do find or should find politics as funny as we do, since Bob Mankoff is all the way down there at the end. I'll start with you. I mean, is this funny stuff for you, Bob? Is it?
Sure. No problem. I think we should broaden it to the intersection of politics, humor, auctioneering, and, of course, the fabulous Foer family, which really...
Here.
You know, it's one of the things that it struck me, the Foer family, is just fantastic, wonderful humor that they had. And everybody thinks now humor is a fantastic, wonderful thing. But it's actually a relatively recent phenomenon. You know, we're here in the synagogue, and everybody, you know, Jews are the people of the book, and now we think they're the people of the joke. But if you actually look in that book, there's nothing funny. When God laughs, you're toast. There's an interesting parallel. There's Elisha the prophet. He goes up to Bethel, and he's bald, and two kids come out, and they say, "Hey, you bald guy," and two she-bears come out of the woods and tear them to pieces. So that's so it's always interesting to me when we're in this environment where humor is basically looked at as a good thing. And you can see when it's a good thing with the Foer family, how it bonds people together. But its basic function in politics is ridicule, and the whole idea behind humor, the justification for it, because it's really very cruel for the most part, is that satire is gonna be corrective. It's gonna laugh folly out of existence. Well, folly's doing really good. That hasn't happened, but I think this political campaign was actually very interesting, because I think that...
Hold the mic close, Bob. Hold the mic.
I think you're the expert on that. You did see actually a really disproportionate use of humor between what the liberal media could do and the conservative media. You really couldn't get an easy way to grab Obama stuff. It could be general. Jay Leno could tell a joke like, Obama's for strong sanctions because it'll cripple Iran's economy, and boy, does he know how to cripple Iran's economy. But that's not personal. With Romney, you could have a joke where Conan O'Brien could say, Obama's back, helping out with Sandy, doing the necessary things, preparing for Sandy, and Romney is putting his smaller houses in his larger house. and you could, in other words, you could get to something about Romney. So I did think that I thought the campaign, and if you look at all the jokes, because I did, look online, all the jokes about Romney versus all the jokes about Obama, I think it did have an influence. There are many, many better jokes about Romney because you could get personal with Romney, and really all you could say about Obama's stuff is that he's failed.
Well, let me ask David Brooks about that. Who? That's all. You had to write interestingly often about our politics, and then talk all weekend long about it in various broadcasts. Obama, Romney, Democrats, Republicans as material.
Yeah. First, let me say, as people meeting Robert for the first time, the best one I heard, Robert and I are part of a dinner group where we meet with newsmakers, and we met Matt Damon. So the newsmakers we meet are Matt Damon,
That was a pretty big
Paula
news, man.
Broadwell. So Matt Damon was sitting to his right, and so he's sitting next to Robert, I guess for the first time.
Yep.
And he says, and he hears Robert talking, and he says, "It's so weird. It's like I'm driving and my left speaker is out." So.
Yes, and yes,
So.
and this was done with a grand gesture. Stop.
Yeah. I guess I agree. I mean, I was trying to think of Romney jokes. Romney jokes are better. I was looking at the Four Brothers, and of course, I was reminded of the Romney brothers roasting their father. And actually, I was up. My best time with the Romney brothers, I was up in New Hampshire, and I was covering their campaign, and Romney was out campaigning in New Hampshire in the primary season with the 5 boys who were named Bip, Rip, Ship, Dip, Lip, and Skip. And so Romney goes out to a table and goes to the diner, goes around to each family at the different tables of the diner and asks them what village in New Hampshire they're from, and then he describes the home he owns in their village. And he goes around, and actually he first names every single person he's met on the way out, 35 names. Wow. So you have the mixture of extreme wealth and extreme phoniness, which was easy to make fun of. And it's sort of my job ideologically to defend Romney. And so I tried to say, people argue that he's out of touch with the Americans because he leads this privileged life, that he's got a home in La Jolla, which has these multi-car garage with elevators for the cars. And I tried to defend him, saying he has many other homes without garages in the elevators. And so he does get us. I have to say, Obama is just murder. Obama is murder.
He's bad material, you mean?
Because he's perfect. I remember the early Messiah phase of the campaign when he'd get carried in by cherubs into each room. What sort of wine would you like me to throw your water into, sort of thing. But still, it was just a humor vacuum. There was nothing to hold on to. I'm trying to think of anything funny that happened. I remember the only thing I could think of in the whole 8 years I've covered the guy is in the early part of the administration. I've been covering him for a little longer.
That seems like a.
They're in conservative years. They're actually 8 years to a term. And so I would criticize them in a column, and usually when you criticize a candidate, it would be, they'd scream at you, they'd call you up the next morning, 7 a.m., you're a complete and total idiot. With Obama, it was, David, we really like you, we respect your work. It's so sad you're a complete and total idiot. And so they were just so self-confident, but there was nothing to hold on to.
Nothing there. Well, perhaps before the evening is over, we'll find something funny about Barack Obama that will help you out. Paula, are we in a period of rich material in politics for humor?
Well, let me just, by way of full disclosure, say that I am an Obama supporter, and I think that makes me more generous because I did vote for him, and as a comic, it's a loss.
You voted against self-interest, is
That's
what
exactly
you said.
right. I said, I'll make stuff up if I have to. I agree. I've always felt, years ago when I would do the Tonight Show, Jay used to say, you got to make fun of the left, you got to make fun of the right. And I'd say, no, you don't. And because I feel that inherently, as a general rule anyways, that the Republicans are just plain funnier than the Democrats. But the other thing is, in this particular election, and I'm always scared when people tell me that they get their news from comedy outlets. And when you were mentioning that, because I hear that all the time myself, but where do those guys get their information? Somebody has to be doing the groundwork in order for those jokes to be able to be told. And I think it's really important that we keep, for example, we need to... education needs to be stronger and stronger and stronger so that we continue to get the joke. Yeah, because otherwise it's kind of terrifying. I mean, I can understand that people on the other side, when you watch Fox or MSNBC, and I'm guilty of watching MSNBC, which is kind of stupid because it's a preach to the choir kind of network, the same way that Fox is on the other side. And I'm not sure that that's really healthy for our democracy either. And MSNBC is so preach to the choir that they don't even have guests. They keep interviewing one another. I swear, I saw a show the other day. I had it on in the hotel room, and I didn't know Andrea Mitchell had a show in there, but apparently she does. And she was just signing off at about the time I turned it on, and she said, I'm Andrea Mitchell, and, this is the end of the Andrea Mitchell show, and thank you for joining me, Andrea Mitchell, on the Andrea Mitchell show. And now we're going to turn it over to whoever it was. Now it's going to be the Tracy Jackson show, and so stay tuned and you'll see the Tracy Jackson show, and I've been Andrea Mitchell, and thank you so much. And then they show Tracy Jackson, and Tracy Jackson says, thank you, Andrea. And Andrea says, thank you, Tracy Jackson. Now it's the Tracy Jackson show. And Tracy Jackson comes on and she says, well, thank you for joining me on the Tracy Jackson show. It's going to be an exciting show. My first guest is Andrea Mitchell. I'm not sure that's as healthy as it could be. I also feel that in this particular year, in terms of finding fodder for comedy among the Democrats, there wasn't a field. Yeah. There was just Obama. And I do interviews all the time where people ask me, what was funny about politics, or were the campaigns funny? I think that it was funny until the part where the others were winnowed out. And then it got definitely not funny anymore. But boy, did I enjoy the Republican primary. It was like watching a front-loading dryer. Everybody had a turn. Everybody teetered up there, and for a couple days, a week before, like a sweatshirt and some jeans knocked them off, and it was everyone. I think I think that people also, when they lead with so much information about their personal lives, for example, the people that come on from forgive me, but a religious perspective and want to tell everyone else what to do with their religion life, that to me just opens them up. For example, someone like Santorum, who wants to tell everybody what to do with their personal life, those kind of people kind of creep me out, and I feel that they should be pilloried, really, so that we can all do what, that's not what we're supposed to be, I didn't think. Now, he kept saying he was against contraception, but he kept wearing that sweater vest, and I feel... the hypocrisy there bothered me.
I think...
But let me go back to something. You had dinner with Paula Broadwell, is that what you said?
No.
You said it. You said...
The quality of the people that we have dinner with.
Matt Damon and Paula Broadwell?
Actual newsmakers.
Oh. Yeah. I just thought you had dinner with her. But you haven't had dinner with her.
David was using that as a reductio ad absurdum.
I see.
That's the kind of person.
Yeah, honestly, it'll come out in the emails. Don't you worry.
I think we did in that series have dinner with a general whom she has written a biography of.
So you had dinner with him?
Yes. In fact, I believe he didn't General Petraeus once give you a medal, David?
I'll just tell that. So General Petraeus has these thing. He walks around. This is literally true. This is not a joke. He walks around in his pocket with these coins, these metal things. And they're his medals of excellence. And he hands me one, and he says, I think you're excellent, have a coin. and on the one hand, I'm thinking, how manipulative. Yeah. On the other hand, I'm thinking, this is so cool. I have a coin from David Petraeus.
See, Allison, you can't make this stuff up. You can't, but you actually have written both for The Daily Show and obviously started the Colbert Report. Did you feel, as you were doing this, hey, we have to maintain our satiric comedic balance?
Never, ever did I feel that. I do have a question about, as well, this dinner with Paula Broadwell
No.
and Matt Damon. I just wanted to make sure that I knew. Did you go to Danico's, that wonderful restaurant in Little Italy? Because all the mayors and movie stars are there. That place is wonderful.
We were above that. We were above that.
I do think that both of those shows, and I definitely don't speak for them, but okay, I totally speak for them.
Go ahead, yeah.
I don't, but they, I think that they do really try to get both sides. This year, I felt it was very, I felt like Paula, even though, I have been writing political satire specifically this year, but I felt the same feeling of like kind of hoping against hope that there would be something funny. That I didn't want Obama to be in office because there's nothing funny about him almost. And that I wanted Romney to get it together because, with the right feeling as fractured as it did, it never really felt like people were really getting behind and supporting him the way that they did McCain, even post Lehman Brothers. There was still a lot of admiration for McCain, even though he was feeling weak in the polls. But with Romney, it never felt that way. And I felt on those shows, on Colbert specifically, you really wanted, something to in person, in Stephen's case, and something to push against. Uh-huh. And that's one of the things I really feel about satire, is it's very hard if you feel like you are not the underdog. When you are the underdog and you feel you have something to push against, I think it's a lot of fun and you have a lot of humor at it. But when you feel like you're in a more powerful position, it becomes less fun, harder to do. Uh-huh. And I think that was an issue throughout the campaign. And I also think, what Bob was saying about, mentioning the funny Romney jokes, he's absolutely right. That was pretty much the one thing to hold on to was Romney's wealth, which, get some good jokes, but in the end, I feel like it's nothing like, the beauty and the depth of a Sarah Palin or even a Paul Ryan, which just seemed like there was a lot more fun with.
Actually, I think one of the funniest jokes about Romney's wealth was told by Romney at the dinner in New York, at the Al Smith dinner when he was in white tie, as is required, and said you dress all kinds of ways during the campaign, a suit for fundraising, and at last a chance to dress the way Ann and I just relax at home. He said it was all enough, and just a rare moment of him being really funny.
One of the interesting things that I find is that there's humor about the candidates, and then there's supposedly the candidates' humor themselves, which is fake. It's ersatz. It's not their humor. It has nothing to do with them. They're just performers. And I think this is something that is different. I mean, I'm going back remembering, partly because everyone is so frightened. So a guy like Kennedy had confidence. He could be funny. He could be witty. Everyone is very, very guarded. Every one of their jokes is written and crafted to make sure and it has to be, those jokes had to be in a comic frame, in a comic environment where they were allowed. For instance, he could not make that joke on the campaign trail, so it's interesting. The one moment, actually, where there was funny stuff about Obama is, of course, when he screwed up the debate. Then, and I thought this was actually good, the New Yorker and even the liberal side, they actually went after him. There was a great Barry Blitt cover which put together a lot of associations where it has Romney talking to, an empty podium, but there's the Clint Eastwood chair.
Yeah. But also it had that ad slip over the top of it, so you had to fold it over.
I'm not responsible for that. Well, that provides the punchline. But the other thing I think is that what you need for humor is you need a difference between the outward appearance and what's going on behind. Obama, you don't have that, really, or you don't feel you have it. I mean, of course, he's a politician, but you don't think there's a whole other different persona. And with Romney, you sort of did feel like, well, he's taking on these various masks, and therefore he was subject.
Also, Obama is so ponderous in his speaking, which I often think he's doing deliberately, so you can't get a soundbite to make a joke off of. Yeah. Just very, very savvy.
Nina, you spend a lot of time not watching the president, but watching the Supreme.
I watch him all the time.
All the time.
Rapturously.
You're not amused?
Oh, reporters really have the same problem that comedians do, which is you looked at Romney and you knew there would be so much material. And so far, you're right, it's impossible to get a good Obama soundbite, extemporaneous soundbite, because he messes them all up. It's as bad as Bush in that regard. hard for you to believe, but this is true. It's as bad as Bush because we're not allowed, at NPR anyway, to edit the President of the United States. You can stop.
No internal edits.
No internal edits. So you
clean 'em up, yeah.
can't get rid of those uhs, and you can't get rid of the nonsense stuff in the middle of the Bush stuff either. So it's very difficult. So you were going to ask me, sorry. I digress.
Just to set the record straight, let me say that we, on our program, we begin each hour usually with about a 7-second clip of tape each hour. And it's the president, whoever he is always the most common person that we do. And Obama's got between 5 and 8 seconds quite often. George W. Bush, we spent months trying to get a coherent 7 seconds out of it. That was agony. That was the one exception. So we shouldn't be unfair about that. The justices, the Supreme Court justices, they
actually are funny.
Yeah.
And the most funny, of course, is Scalia, and he gets the most laughs in the courtroom. And he really is funny, and he's biting funny, but sometimes he's also self-deprecating funny. And the one that comes to mind was last year they were arguing this case about vulgarity, expletives on various programs that were being cited by the FCC, and then the networks would be penalized with fines, substantial fines. And a lawyer by the name of Seth Waxman was up arguing on behalf of ABC, and he said, that we can't tell what's going to be penalized and what's not going to be penalized. Right now, in front of the FCC is a charge of vulgarity, illegal vulgarity in front of the FCC for a statue that was at the opening of the Olympics that's much like the ones in this courtroom with the bare buttocks and bare breasts. And Scalia you see him looking around. and Seth Waxman said, right over here, Justice Scalia, right over
here. You remind me of a story that Dave Barry tells that he once got a story pitched him, I believe, by John Paul Stevens, by the Supreme Court Justice, who sent him an article about the product Beano, which is an anti-flatulent, a preventer of flatulence. And he wrote a column about it and got a tremendous amount of criticism for it. He says, the only story ever pitched him by a Supreme Court Justice in a letter, and it was one of those most attacked as being tasteless.
There are law professors who actually tote up the number of laugh lines in Supreme Court arguments. They obviously do not have enough to do.
It's a way of getting tenure, is what you're.
Yeah, it's a way of getting tenure. But I would like to point out, in a sort of more serious, but not really because I don't want to be serious, vein, that we have always had these kind of satirists, and they're very famous in our history, from Will Rogers to H.L. Mencken to Art Buchwald. I mean, these people have existed, and people have always gotten their information from them, and they've entertained us and amused us, and some of the things that they said about our politicians have stayed with us for generations upon generations. And for those of you who think that there aren't funny Democrats to cover, try Chuck Schumer.
Actually, I think things are actually very, very different than they were in the past. Of course, there were always satirists, but it wasn't sort of a commercial, industrial comic complex. There weren't huge amounts of money to be made, huge amounts of audiences. This is it's the history of the 20th century, where from vaudeville to movies, every comedy becomes a very, very profitable enterprise. So one of the questions you said, well, what do satirists think about this stuff? Well, pretty much it's a joke factory. If you're on the other side of it, you don't really much care about the ideology. You're just looking for the associations. The people for the New Yorker are remunerated for it, and they're turning in 10 and 20 jokes a week. They're looking for the jokes. The writers of sitcoms are very well compensated. Stand-up, I mean, when I got out of graduate school, I was going to go into psychology, or I was going to try stand-up or cartooning, but in 74, actually, there wasn't much stand-up. There wasn't a lot. You really couldn't make a living at it. So now there is a whole commercial complex and it's joined in a democracy to a much larger sphere of online. So there's me, sort of a gatekeeper, but the gates are open now.
This is the satirical industrial complex you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely, which we must guard against.
Well, look,
But when you see,
Nina.
Jon Stewart or Colbert at their best, which is hardly every night, nobody's at their best every night, they do a savage piece of satire with a very specific point. Colbert, I must say, describes the way we finance campaigns more clearly than I can on my best day. And they are, that isn't just one joke lines. Those are great pieces of vicious satire.
And there are 20 or 30 people behind them who are writing for that, and that is a big deal.
Is that true?
Allison, is that true?
You mean in terms of how many writers there are?
No,
Yeah.
in terms of a piece, when you see a piece like that, where it appears to be really, I mean, the ones that Stewart does have actually been about the failure to provide for first responders after 9/11, and he has done a number of truly fabulously vicious satires about that. And is that the product, with help obviously, of the author that we see, or is that just a performer?
Well, I think that John and Stephen and the writers there all venerate point of view as the very, very primary part of any sort of joke writing. And a lot of what that job is, being either, I think either John or Stephen, both of whom are very, very involved with every part of the show, or being a writer there, is trying to come up with an opinion at a very high speed. Because you're not only digesting information that you're getting from various sources, hopefully, but then you're trying to skewer it in terms of, for Stephen specifically, you're trying to skewer it, and you also have to start thinking intellectually or semi-intellectually about, okay, now how do I say the opposite of what I really want to say and make that funny so it feels kind of like you're, driving in reverse on a freeway or something. I think that they feel extremely strongly, and there is authorship for sure for Stephen and John. And what Stephen's been trying to do specifically is, I think, bring his character into the real world and have a connection or illuminate campaign finance by inserting himself. And that actually, to me, is was terrifically exciting about being on the show, and continues to be really exciting about what he does. Does that?
Yes and no.
Yes and no? Okay.
To be fair, I don't think you completely answered the question.
But there's nothing wrong with
that. No, I'm just asking
that they have writers.
But when are we saying, look, are these people saying, look, I think this is outrageous, and I have an idea of how we can approach it. I need some more material to punch it up. Or is somebody saying, here's some good jokes about this, let's fit it into a point of view?
Okay. I think the former, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep them in mind, but I think that, both John and Stephen have very strong points of view and are searching for, they're often searching for the things that they're passionate about, and then we find, ways to bring those ideas to the fore, or they do.
But it is. These are comedy shows. It's not The Nation that has an hour slot on Comedy Central. I mean, this is humor.
The demand for it is huge every night. Yep. No comedian, nobody's that funny in that way where they come up with a bit. So that's why on Letterman and Conan O'Brien and Saturday Night Live, that's just the situation. There's nothing wrong with it. The people are very important because Jon Stewart and Colbert's, their personality animates the humor. They are, I'll give an example. Charles Addams didn't come up with all his jokes. He came up with a lot of them. He created that personality, that family. Once he created that framework, then very talented people could move into it. So that is what I see as sort of different, the demand for comedy, the need for it, and the amount that you have to produce.
Well, let me put this to
pick up
okay, David.
I mean, it's not like I write most of my columns. Paul Krugman writes most of my columns. So talk about skating backward on the freeway. He's actually, when you mentioned The Nation, I was reminded one of my heroes growing up was a humorist who wrote for The Nation, but Calvin Trillin.
Calvin Trillin, yes.
And he was being paid, as he reported at the time, this was in the early 80s, late 70s, in the high two figures.
By the wily and penurious, by the wily and penurious Victor Navasky, the editor of The Nation. Yes.
And I actually got to know him, and I recently, within a couple of years ago, I sent him an email. I said, I just want you to know, one of the big reasons I went into journalism is because of your columns, which I enjoyed so much. And he's somewhat to my left, and he sent me an email back, and it said, let's keep that between ourselves.
So, look, I want to put this to Paula and David, since you were strongest in the claim that there's nothing funny about Barack Obama. Let me. Rush Limbaugh is the most listened to guy in American radio. Right? He's got a satirist on the show named Paul Shanklin. Millions of Americans will listen to Shanklin do songs like, not I am a rock, I am whatever, I am Barack, I am Messiah, whatever is one of the songs. Or for every cent you make, I'll be taxing you. That's one of the songs. He has Barack the Magic Negro is one of his songs, sung in the voice of the persona of Al Sharpton, complaining about the lack of authenticity of this president. Are we talking just about, humor is defined by class and political leaning, and there's funny stuff, but not if you take the president seriously. What do you say?
I think it has a lot to do with point of view.
Yeah.
If I say I'm jolly, I think it's pretty funny, but if somebody else says it, I don't enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
I think it has a tremendous amount to do with point of view. But again, that's why I say I think also if people are, I love it that comedy and satire, I guess the same thing, but bring these topics sort of get people's attention. I think it's Bill Maher, for example, who I'm a huge admirer of. I think he does a very courageous thing because he talks about topics that everybody needs to be thinking about and knowing about, and in this round table format that they use, the possibility of sort of saying something that even you don't believe, you just sort of said it in the moment because it was a joke and you said it, and then you kind of feel like, ooh, wish I hadn't said that. Very, very, very risky. And largely, I wouldn't want to go camping with the guy, but largely I like, sort of his point of view on a lot of things, not on everything. But I just think to bring it sort of into our living rooms that way is a really helpful thing. But at the same time, there has to be a source of the actual information that we have. I like being associated with NPR because I believe that, and I don't know why I trust them. I just do. I think it's your voice. But the information itself, the problem with songs like, or it could be the other way around, I guess, but the problem with those pieces are that if they're misleading people in the comedy, then it's not helpful in our democracy. And it's true, it's not like you can shut it down. It's not like you say, well, okay, you can't make fun of those things. But I do think it's really, really important that I think there's a huge group of people that tend to get they follow something because of the joke, but they really don't know whether it's true or not. And that I think is a big problem for our democracy. But David feels differently.
I do about Bill Maher, but let me get to that later. First, I wrote one humor column this year. I started out as a humor columnist. I was a humor columnist at my University of Chicago, where fun goes to die. Actually, the best
That's
saying
the motto of the university.
Yeah, that is. Actually, the best motto is it's a let's see if I can get this right, a Baptist school where atheist professors teach Jewish students St. Thomas Aquinas. So I wrote a humor column, and I thought I would do that for a career. And so I wrote one this year, which was called The Real Romney. It was during the campaign.
Oh, boy, did you ever write one column?
And so all my Democratic friends came up to me and said, that was hilarious. You should write a lot more humor columns. And all my Republican friends came up to me and said, you're really not very funny. You shouldn't do that again. And so it was completely partisan.
There's a lot of research on this, which can boil down to very simply to that. When our friends make fun of our enemies, it's funny, but not the reverse. This is called dispositional literature. It just goes on, and it's pretty. And the truth is, nothing's funny you really care about. When people start if you really care about
okay,
it.
well then let's deal with this because the only thing the election was about, it was about whether the economy will hurtle toward bankruptcy or whether we will have more wars or continue the ones we're in. Not trivial stuff, and yet material which we enjoy laughing about every night as best we can.
Well, look, one of the things no one really wants to say is, there's a New Yorker cartoon by Bruce Howard Kaplan that said, where I read somewhere where most people are stupid.
Uh-huh.
And George Carlin has a great line which says, this is mean, you know how stupid the average person is? Half the people are stupider than that. And that is the truth. And, so all this stuff about gathering more information and learning stuff, and I'll tell you what the real advantage of getting from most of your stuff from comedy shows is that it's not too much information. When people actually have a lot of information, they become more partisan, not less. They become more polarized. So the only hope for compromise is actually less information.
Nina, you think about a less informative coverage of the Supreme Court, perhaps, that we could... I'll let it lie there. Now, listen, there are questions that I know that you have submitted earlier.
So could the people who have passed out the question cards, could they be collected, please? We're going to go through them and pass the questions to you.
Where are the people going? Oh, they're just leaving because it's a break. They're.
Yeah.
I have a question to start with. So are we does satire and humor, has it made us more polarized or less polarized?
Obviously more. Because it uses it cohesive.
Bob needs a mic.
Use your
and
mic.
Allison,
Use
then
your
why
mic.
don't you answer that?
What it does is, of course, it binds you together often by showing the outgroup. So it will always act to more polarize different positions and points of view, which is, that's just the nature of it.
Allison, what do you think?
Well, I generally think that it brings us together into two different groups. But I did want to say briefly a moment where I thought it did bring us together in a way that I was really proud of. When Colbert Report went to Iraq, we were doing these shows for the troops, and it became very important to us to do a piece making fun of "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," that policy. And we did it in rehearsal. There was a woman there from the military who we thought was going to shut us down. Instead, she said to us, I just want to make sure that you guys say in this piece that this is something that has to be settled in Washington and that we in the military are not the ones that can change this. And we were nervous because none of us, we were not veterans. And certainly a lot of people, McCain most famously would say, this is something about troop cohesion and stuff. And I thought, maybe we just don't understand this culture and we're going to do this and we're going to really insult the troops or they're going to be, angry at us and is it worth it? And we thought it was. And the troops laughed uproariously at this. And I thought it was really... For me, it felt very important to show then on US TV that our military thought that this policy had to go. And I thought that it brought groups together in that sense.
Also, in that fabulous series that you did, Colbert did something really quite personally brave. He let his head be shaved, and he looked really dreadful. And that really it was just a hysterical bit. But it really did show somebody who was willing to do this for this group of people, to get great laughs, guffaws out of this group of people. And I thought I remember sitting there, of course we never watch any commercials, we TiVo everything. And even if we have to just not look for the first 10 minutes so that we don't have to watch the commercials, I remember sitting there watching this, just holding our stomachs and laughing so hard. And I thought it was a particularly admirable thing to do, and I don't like Bill Maher either.
Here's a question. We'll give this question to Paula. It's from one of our audience members. If Romney had won, would he still be funny?
Oh, my gosh. if Romney had won, I would not have time to be here tonight.
There'd be so much
Just
work.
the writing. Just, yeah, and the huge crowds that I'd be playing to. Yeah, no, I'm telling you, I made a huge sacrifice.
David, is satire making us too cynical?
No, it's making people more conservative. This I actually believe. So, and this is this actually goes back to Horace and Juvenal, if you want to know. But I mean, you turn on the Colbert or the Daily Show, and believe me, I make a huge distinction between Colbert and Daily Show and Maher, because I think Colbert and Stewart have a warm heart, and I don't actually think that about Bill Maher. And so I make that distinction. Nonetheless, what's the job of the show? The job of the show is to pick out the stupid stuff people say every day and put it in front of people. So if you watch it day after day, which most of us do, you get the impression those people are just a lot of stupid idiots. And so how do you trust government if you believe that? And so to me, the huge conservatizing, or the press, or, well, that's true. Well, I mean, well, just one serious point. So in the most important polling statistic in America is, do you trust government to the right thing most of the time? And so until about 1980, or maybe 1975, for basically 100 years, 70 or 80% of Americans trusted government to do the right thing most of the time. So right now, it's 19%. And so part of that is government screwed up a lot, but government wasn't so great in the 20s. Part of that, I think, is a lot of people have the attitude, I'm so great, those idiots in Washington, I could do it fine, but they're idiots. But part of it is the combined effect of 60 Minutes, which unveils a scandal every week, and the Comedy Central, which you look at them, they're all idiots.
I have an important question. Has anybody here ever been polled on that topic? Anybody? Yeah. Has anybody ever answered the question to a pollster so that it would be recorded on the statistic that David just talked about?
Nate Silver could really answer this for you.
He would. He's not.
It's a sampling thing.
Because
You question the question.
I question the question. I do. I have not. When somebody calls my house, I answer the phone from about 4 o'clock on like this. I have no money. And usually I'm right. It was a fundraising thing. But sometimes it's someone saying, well, I'm calling on behalf of blah, 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 and we're doing a poll. I couldn't possibly. I always say, thank you, I'm sorry, I can't. So I wonder about these polls.
Your objection, we've taken due notice of your objection. As for funny Democrats, asks someone else, what about Joe Biden? Saturday Night Live thinks he's pretty funny. Good material, Joe Biden?
Great
He's
material.
got what I call logorrhea dementia, which he talks so much he drives himself insane.
Well, he's sort of the Democrat equivalent of Sarah Palin in that you don't really have to do very much with what he says. He's already doing it for you. But, but to David's point, I think, look, essentially humor is actually not rebellious. It's conservative. It's making fun of people and saying people are behaving badly, and not just politicians. But also in general, most people who are funny are liberals. Most people who are funny are on sort of the left side because it's sort of anti-authoritarian and stuff like that. If you were to poll the comedians, I don't know if you've ever been polled on this.
We don't have time to
You would
be polled.
find that most of them, and this would be true of cartoonists, I mean, not that far left, but that would be their general leaning, probably because the social issues are, and because it's generally anti-authoritarian. And so their perception would be that a Republican government would be more authoritarian and more rules for your own, social life.
But say during the Eisenhower, this is a long time ago, during the Eisenhower years, the scene in Chicago, the rise of political satire about the dullness of the Republicans, we associated Mike Nichols and Elaine May with a liberal a liberal sentiment, no? And with we think they undermined and made people more conservative by not trusting figures of authority. I don't know.
Well, I would say cumulatively over the years, yes. I mean, the perversity is the anti-establishment mode has undermined establishments, including government. If I could just say, I think historically, it used to be thought that satirists were conservative, if you go back to Horace and Juvenal, because basically they were taking modern behavior and measuring it against old standards. And so they were enforcing the social norms.
But humor also there are differences between, if you look at it, what conservatives think are funny, people who are very conservative and authoritarian, and this could be even on the left, they like a joke you can get. Absolutely. And there's a lot of research on this, and joke where, if I say, okay, it's a French army knife and it has all corkscrews. Everybody understands that. You put the two things you put the two things together, really. But a lot of jokes now are more absurd. They don't really have resolution in that way. And when you actually do these,
I think that's true of conservative Jews. But I don't think that's true of
conservatives in general.
Speaking
I just told you the one Jewish joke that I heard that was actually funny. I told it to Robert in the show.
One Jewish joke.
Well, we can all have our one. But it's a very quick one. It's a waitress is going up to a bunch of table of Jewish men at a restaurant, and she says, "Is there anything it's okay?"
Okay. So one of our audience members asks, it's very good. It was good the first time you told it to me, and it's good again. That's the test of a really good joke. What about Obama as a comedian, Allison? He had the Rom. Were you aware of the Romnesia speech? When you can't remember what you proposed, that's Romnesia. But the good news is Obamacare covers pre-existing conditions. It was a pretty funny speech. But,
and horses and bayonets, certainly, for Obama. He has wonderful speechwriters, and I think he's a very funny, smart person.
And delivered that one pretty well. Paula, I'm reading from a card. Paula touched upon the danger of satire being misleading. Has political satire ever been too misleading to the point that it has destroyed a candidate? If that would be too misleading to the point. Can you think of somebody who was... it wasn't satire. There was a mocking commercial that showed Michael Dukakis in the tank, driving the tank, which was it was a comic image of somebody. It didn't help. There were other problems with that campaign. It wasn't misleading. So I think the answer is no. So far as we know, the answer is no. And here's a question without which any panel in the 21st century would be incomplete. Have new media changed political humor? You're a blogger, Bob, yes?
Well, I think they absolutely have. One of the things is... I feel good. One of the things is the way humor works is partly by how quickly you can make the joke. So when Romney said a binder's full of women,
that was not a joke.
That itself was funny, but the immediate response, and I'm looking at it sort of in an objective way, wasn't much of a joke. But yet, because it occurred so quickly, could be spread so quickly, it had a big effect. And then everybody, the professionals, the licensed humorists, could all, get all over that. So I think that's going to become more and more, because humor is this social phenomenon. And now you have these networks in which it's sort of a lingua franca. It's the way people are actually communicating. So I think it's changed it a lot.
Did you think he was joking?
What?
Did you think he was joking when he said bind?
No. He was not joking, but the jokes in response, the meme, if you will, which was very slight in terms of really joke quality, didn't have to be much of anything because it occurred right when it happened.
Okay, we're obviously... Yes, Allison.
Oh, I actually had a couple things to say about this. One of the things I wanted to say is I'm on Facebook, and many of my Facebook friends are from high school, and I went to high school in North Florida. So now, since then, I've lived in Brooklyn and Silver Lake, Los Angeles, and I wrote for Portlandia, and I live a very, I eat a lot of cheese, nice cheese, I feel like, which I'm very lucky to have good cheese shops nearby. But a lot of people I'm friends with on Facebook are friends from back then, and a lot of times I get their jokes. A lot of them are very, very strongly right-wing. I don't think if Facebook didn't exist, I don't think I would be hearing their views. I find their jokes often very funny, and sometimes I question whether there is a difference between conservative humor and liberal humor, because I think that they're based on the same themes. And one of those, the primary one, and I think new media has a lot to do with this, is hypocrisy. That, I think, in the last 10 years has become the cardinal sin. And of course, The Daily Show does these amazing montages, and now the press, Meet the Press does it sometimes. And, I believe I've heard sort of thing on NPR too, where you have like long pieces of little edited together points where we see that someone said the exact opposite of what they claim to have always believed many times. And this, of course, is something that I feel like also owes a lot to how recordable everything in our culture is now and how quickly they go online. And I think, kind of the whole world gets to be The Daily Show at this point, yes, with their ability to post and to record everything, including this very meeting.
Ultimately, you can argue it's a low standard. We're asking you, have you yourself contradicted yourself in what you've said, rather than if you've been a consistent moron about things, well then,
right,
that's okay. We're obviously just getting started here at the intersection of humor and politics, but the hour is late. And so I would like to, first of all, thank Bob, Cousin David, Paula, Allison, Nina, for your work. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And I also want to wish Nina and her husband Floyd a happy anniversary. Husband David. Excuse me, wrong husband. Wrong husband. Sorry about that. So much. Happy anniversary. And thank you so much for being here. So much for Wikipedia. So much for Wikipedia. Wikipedia. I want to thank everybody. I need to say a couple special thank yous. First of all, everyone here who's been just so amazing and beautiful and so kind to be here. And I want to thank Burt and Esther and Frank and Jonathan and Josh for joining us, and all of our amazing board and sponsors and patrons, and then the members of the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative, and our hardworking staff and volunteers and friends, and to Nancy Rosenberg, who chaired this event, and Toba Penny, our wonderful event who helped make this happen. Our printer donated this beautiful program book, and everyone's names is in the program book, and their right names. And I just want to also thank all of you for joining us. I want you to pick up a copy of Moment, this current issue, on your way out to read when you get home. It has a symposium on the same topic. We interviewed most of the people here on the panel, but also Peter Siegel, Gene Weingarten, Dave Barry, Barney Frank, Trevor Potter, who's actually Stephen Colbert's attorney and had some interesting things to say. So there's a wide variety of people. And also I urge you to support our work. Subscribe to Moment, print or digital. Sign up for our free online newsletter. Visit our website, our blog, and come see us in action in our office in Van Ness and Wisconsin Avenue, and discover why our work and our calling is so important. Now, dessert is awaiting outside. The lucky auction winners, please go downstairs to check out. Good night. And thank you so much for coming.